All right, I
All
think I got you going on my on both ends here on my computer.
yeah. Okay.
All right. Well,
Well,
thanks for
fire when
having me.
ready.
Welcome to the end of your day. I promise I'll keep you on time and on track. I was thinking it was the end of all your days, but I guess it sounds like you've got another day tomorrow, but I'll keep it moving along for you today. Again, this is specifying powered mobile shelving storage systems. It's presented by the manufacturers Montel that put this together. And I'm with Workspace Technology. I've been in the high density storage business since 2008 and left briefly to go do more industrial stuff for about 4 years. And I'm back doing high density storage and industrial now. So I'm kind of full spectrum storage girl. But after this point, I'll kind of keep it non-specific to the manufacturer and we'll address any questions you have either during or after. Feel free to stop me if I'm going too fast or if you have any questions in the middle. So the learning objectives that have been identified for this presentation are to understand how the mobile systems support sustainable design goals and users' needs, to identify the safety features to prevent accidental injury, to describe security features for mobile systems, how they contribute to green and LEED certification efforts, and to discuss the variety of applications for these mobile systems. And while this presentation is specific to powered system, if it's important to health, safety, and welfare, I'll also kind of give you a mention of how that applies to mechanical assist systems as well. So our first learning goal is powered mobile systems supporting sustainable design goals and user needs in buildings. In order to understand how it does that, we kind of have to understand what we're talking about in general. So what are high density powered mobile storage systems? I'm sure many of you have seen these. You've probably seen them when you were in school and at your university campuses at a minimum. But they're an easy way to store, an effective way to store products as they're considered high density. It takes out the aisle space. Can use basically any type of shelving, shelving, cabinets, racks, drawers, basically anything that you can store something on, we can put on a mobile system, from the smallest to the largest, up to 60,000 pounds actually. And they're supported by carriages that are at the base, and then the carriages ride on wheels and on rails. Fairly simple concept. If you're looking at something like these, you can see the rails. You can see my pointer. You can see the rails that the carriages, this is the carriage, rails, carriage that they ride on, and they eliminate these aisles. So you can see in something like this, if these were, each like 3 foot long, we've taken out, and maybe a 3 foot aisle, we've taken out three of those sections of three of those aisle ranges. So just in doing that, we've saved 80 plus feet, 80 to 100 feet, depending on the size of your aisles. So conventionally, this is what you would see. You'd see an aisle space for every set of shelving. If you've got a customer that they have no growth, but they want to gain some square footage back for a different function, then you can do high density and condense that space down into a smaller footprint. If you're designing for new construction at a new facility, then you just are planning for that much less space if you're using high density. The other way around is if you have a customer that is experiencing a lot of growth and they don't have the funds to move into an existing facility or need to make better use of the space that they have, you can double your storage capacity. And I like to say, I think the truth is somewhere in between, because you may have somewhere in between where maybe you're condensing down in a new construction, you're condensing down to half the space, but maybe you actually need to encompass some of these other things. Maybe you've got file storage out here, maybe you've got IT storage, maybe you've got your holiday decorations. There's a lot of things that could potentially be put in here. Multiple departments can be put into one storage system. So that's the other thing is, sometimes maybe you need to look elsewhere and see what else needs to go into this space as well. So it's easy to see how by either taking up less space or making better use of your space, you're saving money. You're avoid renting or buying another warehouse if you can make better use of your existing space. You're accommodating growth. Um, Obviously, improvement of organization and safety. You're bringing stuff into one safe location. One of the one that's often overlooked is this one is you can control and authorize access. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on, but you'll see that's what I'm talking about when you can bring other types of other departments into one room. You're gaining some additional levels of control on that, and that's the ways that you can put different departments into one location. And then how to prevent accidental injury in the building design with high density storage. So they do this on powered systems by talking about they have complete aisle detection passive safety system. So at any point when the user goes in, they're being captured by photo sweeps. This is essentially what is happening. So they're saying here it's a passive system. It detects users anywhere in the system. And it requires no conscious effort to activate the system since it's totally passive. So they keep using the word passive. And why do they keep using the word passive here? And I want to compare it to mechanical assist. In mechanical assist system, you're turning the handles and the handles move the carriages back and forth on the rails. When they do that, the safety to keep a user from entering the system and having another user close this aisle on them is kind of twofold. They can pull out a pin at the wheel and that will kind of block the carriage from moving. Or if it's specified, there will be a mechanical brake that runs along this bottom here. There'll be a mechanical brake that all you do is put your foot down and it stops the system. So, but those are both active controls. So if you're in a public space where maybe a user doesn't understand those more active controls, then you've got these completely passive controls. And here's kind of what those look like as well. So at the lower level, you've got photo sweeps like this that run from this side of the carriage to the other carriage across that opening. And then you have these photo sweeps that sweep across the length here. There's also one toward the top. So as a user enters, they're getting captured at the waist level. They're getting captured as they cross each of these barriers. And then if the system would happen to move toward them or they are near the system, it also breaks that photo beam. So there's several different safety levels that are considered, each considered passive. So you've got at least 3 different passive safety levels there. And it's basically they're just saying, if you've got something that's like this in a public space, it's set up so that a user cannot override those. So you can't have someone in one aisle force a change to close an aisle on another user. That is the bottom line here. The carriages are stopped when in use. There are options for audio feedback as well, multiple language, different volume adjustabilities. That talk about if the aisle's in use or ready to be used or moving. There's overload protection. So if for some reason, maybe something's not hitting the sweep, maybe there is something under the carriage somehow, or maybe there's something overhanging a shelf, the motor will still power off in those instances as well if there's excessive power applied, if it senses that there's something wrong in the system that way as well. Again, here's the aisle entry sensor. So and that one's taking account as the count as people are coming in. It knows how many people are coming in. So you may have one person trip it, but then you may have another person come in so that when the first person leaves, it doesn't think the system's vacant. It knows that there are actually 2 people in the system and it waits for the second one. So there's a people counter in that one as well. The automatic lock and relock timer is a feature that actually serves multiple uses. So it can be programmed for a predetermined period of time to automatically lock or relock the module if inactive for more than a determined period. So this can kind of be used in multiple ways. So yes, your system can lock. Say you have access to your system, but your preferred is that you want your system to be closed with not in use. So you can have your system set to after a certain amount of time to close all aisles. You can have your system set to what we call fire park. So it gives equidistant spacing to each aisle. It gives your floor loading, equal floor loading if we do something like that. We can also have it set to preferred aisle. So if you have one aisle that's your predominant aisle that you want to have more readily available for quicker access, we can have a preferred aisle. So that one feature right there actually serves multiple functions and can be programmed a variety of different ways. This one also, the fail-safe technology prevents carriage movement should a component of the safety system fail. So if any one of those fails, you have to have a system check to come and check it. And also, I think it shows on the next slide. It is more than just PC based these days. You can run this from an app. Our installers can troubleshoot from an app. We can have end users have managers that can troubleshoot from apps as well, and just with an app on their phone, just do a quick safety check and get the system back up and running. Sustainable sites is another learning objective. And this is what we talked about with multiple one of the things that we talked about was with multiple users. For HIPAA, you can have basically this control panel here. You could have multiple users, each with their own PIN code, and they may have access to only certain areas of the system. So that's how you can have multiple departments. So you could have one department, and those users have authorization to use maybe the first 3 carriages. Other users only have rights to use their set of carriages. There's a little bit of an audit trail that goes along with this. So you can have it set up by days of the week and by hours as well. So there's a whole range of specificity that you can get to with this system to be able to put multiple users in one space. This is what I was going to talk about before, the automatic motor brake. So in the event that, this goes along with security as well, that in the event the system is powered off, say somebody tries to just turn the power off to your building and gain access to your system. On a powered system compared to a mechanical assist system, the brakes are on when the power is off, or if there's a safety trip, or for any feature, the default is the brakes are engaged. So someone cannot turn your system off and gain access to your system. One other thing that this helps with is if you have a system on a floor that's not a ground level floor, and while it may pass structural for both load and deflection, this also kind of helps with the drift, so that if your system is always in brake mode, their system won't have any drifting if the floor has deflection issues, even if they're within the criteria. Let's see. So as far as LEED certification goes, these are your categories that we try to assist with: sustainable sites, energy, atmosphere, materials and resources, air quality, and innovation and design. And naturally, these are going to be, how much we contribute to these depends on the function of the building. Obviously, the greater the amount of storage as a function of the building, the greater amount this impacts. As far as energy and atmosphere, obviously, if you're using and able to build a smaller facility because you're using less space, that contributes to less overall energy. You can add things like automatic overhead aisle lighting, so you're only lighting the portion of the aisles or spaces that you're using. One other thing that I add to the conversation here is that you're also filling the void, so you're filling the space to have greater efficiency as well. You have less voids and air in those systems. I know some of you are from Florida, some of you from not. Southern states, we're not necessarily where the steel is being produced and manufactured for a lot of these things. So this will depend on where your project is located. how much we impact this, and again, how much of the function of the building is storage will obviously impact this. But one of the things that I like to bring up at this point is reuse and repurpose. Um, a lot of times if you've got a customer that's moving to a new facility, we can reuse their existing shelving. There's no there we can work with them to reuse that existing shelving as long as it fits vertically in the space. And it makes sense to them. A lot of times though, their own logistics and timeline won't allow for that. So in that case, we can repurpose it. Say they have another facility. For example, maybe if you're working with a university, library shelving and pharmacy shelving are nearly identical. So, or, or maybe it's a file room that you want to convert to an IT room just based on, logistics of when you're moving things around that you can't use it here during that time, but we can use it there. There's a lot of ways that we can reuse and either reuse or repurpose the shelving. Maybe you've got a football team that you're going to take, they're going to revise their shelving, but maybe basketball needs it. They don't get the funding that football gets. There's a lot of ways to reuse and repurpose. Um, they're not going to off gas. Powder coated steel, so they're not going to off gas. Is the main point of this one. And then this is kind of, I think, more of my favorite one, especially on a day like today when I've gone after a lot of other vendors who maybe have really, really fun and very aesthetically pleasing products and things that you want to have spotlight on. We help with that because if we're brought into the core of a building, um, we're helping contribute to the day, not only to giving you more space to do those things that you like to do that are so much more aesthetically pleasing than storage. So you can put the storage in the middle and increase your daylighting and views in the other areas, which I kind of love that one myself. The kind of the same things because we're saving space, we're reducing your operating costs. Sustainable workspace, we are one of the things that as employees go home to work, as they come back to the office to work, the storage is one of the things that does stay in the building, and kind of gives you the ability to create the flexible workspace in the other areas. Increases the organizational marketability as well. You've got everything has got its place. It's more organized and you're more productive in a space that is more organized and efficient. Now, how does that apply to the actual spec writing? And we'll take a look at some spec details as we look at kind of each different industry here. There really isn't an industry or a vertical market that doesn't have storage issues. But these are kind of some of the key markets. Educational libraries are probably one of the largest uses for high density mobile systems, are the ones that probably a lot of people are familiar with. You've seen in university libraries, almost every university library, almost every university sports team. You'll see these, and I will say these used to be just for universities, but we're seeing these drift down more and more into high school level. I can't tell you how many football teams. I'm just impressed by some of the high school football programs and the sets. It's pretty incredible. So even now at the high school level, we're seeing high density storage being put into use. Another example of the library. I'm going to show you some more details on these here in a second. Here's one, just kind of reminding me of the topic that we're seeing a little bit more of is that all libraries, especially public libraries, the city and county level are moving towards shorter stacks to maintain, I guess, better control and safety of the patrons of the libraries. They're moving to a little bit shorter stacks. And by going to high density, they can make those stacks a little bit shorter, but maintain their capacity of their collections. On the design and lead side, we can Source your end panels locally. These can be really whatever you want them to be. They to complement whatever design you have. They can be sourced locally. So we can have this really be whatever you want it to be. And again, this is when you can kind of see it's to the core of the building for better daylighting and views. And then another market, museums, which I love. I love museums. The curators are always, I think, very interesting. Their collections are very interesting, and they just have a bunch of different types of storage, which is kind of fun for me. So here you can see cantilever rack for textile storage is one type of storage. You've got archival boxes. You've got wide span shelving. Let me go, actually might go back here a second. So you'll see cantilever. This is wide span shelving. So it's like pallet rack, but a lighter version of pallet rack. If you're not familiar with wide span, is what we refer to as wide span or mini rack. You can do a lot of features, things for museums. You can do roll-out drawers, roll-out shelves, museum cabinets. There really is, and we can, and again, remember that we can put their existing cabinets on mobile because these are a high ticket item. So do remember that we can put those cabinets on mobile. And again, more education, business. Again, business, you can go from the small, this is a small collection, all the way to actually storing motorcycles. There's really nothing in between for these. We do everything from contact lenses and glasses, again, to motorcycles for businesses. Sometimes it's a public space, but a lot of times it's the back room. It's not unusual. If you went through your mall, you'd find if you actually peeked into the back rooms of a lot of the shoe stores and things, you would see high density mobile storage, your Apple stores. One other thing about business is what we talked about is while you can have the powered system, you could have a secure room, first of all. You could have the powered system have authorized access using the pin control pad. You can also have secured storage within those areas as well. So we can put doors, we can put drawers, we can have a tambour drawer. There's a lot of different ways that we can add additional security and storage features to the systems. Government, military, it's kind of want to show here. It's not a great picture, but one thing it does show is steel end panels. Very, very rugged. A lot of times these military installs, especially in Florida, Northeast Florida in particular, these are in open hangar bays. So these kind of stand up a little bit better to the elements than a laminate end panel does. The government still has lots of paper. We still on the government side see quite a bit of paper storage. But this is one that I look at as the what not to do. As far as the specifying portion goes, we start with your rails, whether rails are recessed or surface mounted at number one. We look at whether a system is mechanical assist or is it powered, number two. What level of power, what level of safety is number three. One of the things that's often overlooked because it's an additional part of your specification in those Division 10 specs. You've got the shelving and then you've got the mobile system is sometimes the shelving is not adequately specified. And a lot of times you'll see maybe this length is defined, but perhaps the shelving itself is not defined. Or maybe just the length, maybe if we're lucky, the height, not always even the height. But the shelving type is not defined, nor the size is defined. And if you look at something like this, you'll see that these are all plain shelves. They were all kind of given the same depth and height, I'm assuming, based on file storage. So some things fit right, some things don't. But if you also look at this, these are plain shelves. There are no slots in them. So that's why the file folders are kind of falling all over the place. It looks like this room probably was more intended to be file storage, but there's also like there are no pull-out shelves or reference shelves to look at anything. Again, no dividers and plain shelves. So not a great design. So remember when specifying this that we need to also specify the depth and the width of these shelves and know that they can be different. The depths can be different within a system. You can have a 24-inch shelf here, but maybe only have a 12-inch shelf here. We can have different sizes of carriages, different sizes of shelving in each system. And then as opposed to here, or again, if you say if you know that you're accounting for file storage, well, is it loose file storage like we saw in the previous picture, or is it box file storage? If it's box file storage, you know, there are only certain shelving widths that fit boxes appropriately. A lot of manufacturers will do either 30s or 42s here. Some manufacturers do a 39. They do the 1 meter, which will fit boxes perfectly. But if it's not specified and a run length is just given, you'll probably get 48s, and you're gonna have a lot of wasted space here. So just keep that in mind. That just don't forget the actual shelving component. And the other part is back to this picture is, you know, consider whether you want plain shelves or slotted shelves. If they just simply specified some slotted shelves on here, we could add in dividers and have actually more potential for reuse in the future as well, if those shelves are slotted versus plain. Again, government, military. This is what I'm going to show you kind of a before picture. I'll show you a better picture of this later. This is kind of before, where you can see that they've kind of just taped these file folders on here as a way to pre-sort before they go in here. We can do different M panels and we can do some of these things better than that. And I'll show you a picture that has done that better in a few more slides. Again, government, military, could be anything. Could be paper, could be weapons, really could be anything. There's a million different ways to store each of these items. Like some of the, you know, weapons have weapons racks. We can do optics, not just this way, but in drawers. Sometimes they like to issue as kits. Sometimes they like to have stored this way as like items together. There's a lot of different ways, things to take into consideration. And these shelves can each be mixed as well. I believe the intent here was to show you the cantilever lighting that we talked about, where only the aisle that's being accessed, even though they do have the lights on in here, when the aisle that's being accessed is the aisle that's being lit. You can get cantilever lighting installed.
Hey, Robin.
Yeah.
Hey, there's a few questions that are
okay.
Interesting that talk about not necessarily the different types of them, but the stuff that goes around it. So sensor detection, fire suppression, sprinkler systems, things like that.
Okay. Okay, I'll go through. Robin, are there sensors that detect if there are critters living in or moving through the system that may come in during non-office times? Well, there are the photo sweeps that we talked about that are going to be active in the aisle. You know, that those are only going to pick up things that are in the active aisle. I would say you could potentially have one if it's during non-office. No one's probably going to catch that. There are optional sensors as a kind of a 4th degree level of safety that you can have an overhead camera mounted as one of the safety features as well. That's really less used probably just because it's really overkill. But those overhead cameras that we have as part of a safety system, those probably would detect those in off hours if you wanted to look and see if you saw anything in there. If you were seeing signs, if you were seeing drop-ins, if you were seeing them chewing on something, then that would pick those up. How does fire suppression work in the system? It's tied into your if fire park is something that you want to have in the system, it's tied in to your fire suppression system or to your fire alarm system. So it does have to be tied into your fire alarm system. Sprinkler system requirements. Again, that gets complicated. You know, your typical rule is we're going to stay 18 inches under sprinkler heads. You know, if we're doing just your standard office, you know, low height system, then it's your typical 18 inches under the sprinkler. If we started getting into more robust systems and we're starting to get more into the industrial side, then we have to take a look at what we're storing, the heights we're storing, and we start kind of getting into those same requirements that you would have with high pile storage. So the answer that's complicated if it's basically a larger system, or if we've got carriages that are larger than 60 inches depth, then we have to start looking into more of those high pile storage situations. Sorry, wish we were more live so I could answer your questions better, but thank you for stopping me, and those were good questions. Some of those you might see a few more examples of some of those later, and I'll try to point them out to you. Thanks for the questions. Let's see. Public safety. This is another one I kind of want to point out this end panel here. A lot of times when you see mobile systems specified on plans, you'll see the system kind of just all carriages, all movable. Keep in mind that if this is not a secure room, or a room that we don't care about the security once they're in the room of what's in the mobile system, you can save a little bit of money by splitting this one up and having two stationary on each end. However, if we do want to have security within the room, then we can put a back panel or tambour doors or anything that we want to have, and we can lock down the one side, and then the whole system, you can see the whole system then closes to the center or to whatever direction we want it to. But we can close the whole system and lock the whole system down that way. So not only is the room secured, but the system within the room is secured. I just want to go back to that. And this one that is such an easy and inexpensive thing for us to do, to do that as well. Again, all types of storage and public safety. You know, even down to sewing supplies and uniform issue in public safety, there's a lot of it. I think I got just a picture of this. You know, your standard police department probably has about 4 times this quantity of just of uniforms on hand. I think the counties around me, I would say they have about 4 times this much on hand in each of the local counties. Lockers, you know, this is public safety, but I would say also, you know, pilot lockers, these individual lockers, National Guard, they have a movement to keep more of their personal guard equipment. They're trying to keep it out of grandma's attic and back people's cars. They're trying to get that brought in to the units. They just don't have space accounted for them. So you'll see large lockers on high density there as well. There's a lot of applications where we can actually do lockers on high density as well. Okay. This is what I was talking about when I mentioned the file storage. We can do a sorter end. So if you've got a file room, instead of having those file pockets on each end and kind of pre-sorting that way, you can certainly do something like this and have a sorter end as well in the end. Healthcare is another fantastic market for high density. It's almost in every area of a hospital is high density. Obviously started as records and radiology, particularly mammogram, were high density storage for the longest time. Now it's moved into other areas. And this is another kind of example of, it's close, but not quite the best design. This is another one where we want to be careful on the health safety. So it is a health, safety, and welfare issue. You know, this one's close. We've got perforated shelving, which is good for dust control in a healthcare environment. We've got a canopy top, and we've got a solid bottom. However, if you don't specify this, most manufacturers, this is going to be about 6 inches off the floor. So you have to be careful in healthcare that you actually require that the first shelf be at, 10 inches or whatever the facility's requirements are. And sometimes they make it greater. At least 10 inches off the floor here, and have that be closed. Have the system be closed. So you need to make sure that those elevations, if you can include elevations, especially in environments like this, it's important. Another thing I like to point out, not specific to healthcare, but just in general, are these canopy tops. This application, they've gotten a solid canopy top for dust control. When you're specifying a project, you need to be clear if it's self openings versus shelves, and if you're considering this a shelf or a canopy top, just need to be careful on how that is being specified, because these are typically not weight bearing or load bearing, nor do you want your customers storing above that height for code compliance typically. But you need to be careful of that. Retail, we kind of talked about retail already. Almost every retailer these days, has high density storage. Industrial, again, up to 60,000 pounds. You can do mechanical assist up to 8,000 pounds for small industrial applications, or just even light industrial, like smaller palletized projects that a lot of grow facilities, agri farming, use pallet rack type systems and these type systems. These are even more, obviously with industrial, you're going to have to pay even better attention to the rack structure. So we need to be very aware of what we're putting on the rack. It's very important to know the size of the loads, make sure we're maintaining proper transverse and longitudinal flue spaces. Again, we're taking all that code into consideration, and hot piled storage into consideration as well, and commodity types. There's a lot that goes into the industrial side. Different types of rack. Again, any type of storage equipment can go on mobile systems. Just you can see the overhead power. There's also safeties. There's a control that typically rides with a forklift operator to open the aisles, so that they are not hopping off their lifts to open and control the aisles, although they can be controlled at the aisle entry. One thing, you still want to have good aisle spacing. You want to make sure that, when we do something like this, we're taking a user down from 100% to selective to only the selectivity based on the number of aisles that you have. So you might want to, take into consideration what their pull rate is, and plan your aisles accordingly. So you're not going to get necessarily the 50% capacity increase that you would see in a non-industrial application. But it's still very efficient bit of storage. Let's see, should I go back to this one? You can see on this one, yeah, when we're designing these, we need to take in consideration how they're loading their pallets, and I guess like the stability of their pallets as well. You can see in these kind of things that's a consideration as well. This one's very nice. They've got nice uniform pallets. Kind of a lighter industrial. You see a lot of this in aviation, which there's a lot of in this area. Athletics and sports. Okay, and here's another example of how specifying the shelving matters, and the type of shelving that matters. If this was the plain shelving like we saw earlier, we wouldn't be able to come in and put these bend fronts and these dividers in these systems. You can see, like on this slide, you may have a customer that wants the totes, or they have the totes, but if you ask them, they'd rather have something like this. And if we gone in and only done plain shelving, just to accommodate totes and didn't ask that question, they wouldn't have the future option of being able to do this. So that's one thing I like to make sure that we think about these things. Like, these are things that can be added later on if we just kind of plan ahead. And let me see this next. Yeah, so I think I got one more picture to show you. I like better actually. This one. So you can see here, like on this one, when a lot of times we'll see, because we don't know exactly what we're putting in these systems, that we'll often just see 24-inch deep shelving. And this is an example of where you can see someone put in 24-inch deep shelving, and it works, but it just doesn't work great. It'd be better if these were 30. Keep it a little bit cleaner. It would be less getting smashed when the system's closed. I'm gonna go back a couple slides now. And then things like helmets and shoes and things, these only need like 15 inches deep. So it's okay, if we don't know any better, if we don't have the details yet, it's okay to start with the 24s. But again, know that we can break those systems down, and we can have shelving that's 24-inch deep, or actually 30 inches deep for this, where you got 15 inches back to back for helmets and shoes. And then we use that space we gain by making those shelves smaller so that we can accommodate these more appropriately. So just keep that in mind. And I know that it becomes a challenge when you're trying to write Division 10 specs. You don't want to have, 16 different shelf types and shelf elevations and things, but it does make a big difference in the end product. So we talked about powered mobile systems for sustainable design goals and your end user needs. Basically the concept of that was we're either saving them space for other activities, or we're saving them overall space in general, and we're reducing their power needs by using a smaller space. We talked about the safety features, which a lot of that had to do with our photo sweeps or our security features. And the other security features for the powered mobile systems, which allows you to have other users in the building. We talked about, let's see the next slide. We talked about recycled content. We talked about repurpose and reuse. We talked about daylighting and views. And toward the end there, we got into the specification writing and kind of the details and things to kind of keep in mind when writing the specifications for mobile systems. And I talked very quickly. I'm at the